Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from the night. I know these recaps haven't been as frequent recently. I'm currently out of town visiting some family for Thanksgiving, so just haven't had as much time to record as I typically do, but I thought I'd go ahead and sneak one in here, talk about some of these in-season tournament games a little bit, and specifically focus on two squads that have been going different ways this season. The first squad is a young rebuilding team that has found their way towards the top of the Eastern Conference standings, and it feels like they're in the midst of their breakout season. Meanwhile, on the other side is another young rebuilding team that has again sat at the bottom of the standings to begin this season. Things are looking abysmal. It's been a disaster so far this season, and I really don't know where the light at the end of the tunnel is for the franchise. Before we get into that though, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos, and as always, we'd love to hear your takeaways down below in the comments. Let's go ahead and start things off positively and begin with the Orlando Magic. Coming to the season, I had some decent expectations. I wasn't expecting them to be a playoff team or anything like that. I thought they'd be like play-in, right on the verge of missing/making the play-in tournament. They'd be right around that realm, and really just depended what type of progression we saw from their young guys this upcoming season. We saw a lot of great stuff from them last year, specifically over the second half, over those final 41-ish games. They locked up defensively, really developed that identity. Paolo only got better and better, winning Rookie of the Year, and did it nearly unanimously while averaging over 20 points per game. Franz continued to get better, and it felt like he was on a star trajectory leaving his second season. I like some of the play from some of the supporting pieces. Jamal Mosley was impressing me as a head coach. Ultimately, I just feel like the Magic ended the end of last season on a pretty positive note. So coming into this year, I was hoping we could see more development, and I thought, hey, maybe they could even get as high as like a 6 seed if we see a lot of development and things go their way. So far, things have gone their way, but it hasn't been like in terms of luck. They have willed themselves up to the second seed in the Eastern Conference. They've won 6 straight games, 11-5 over the season, and they've done so while dealing with key injuries to Markelle Fultz, who's only played 5 games, and Wendell Carter Jr., who also only played 5 games. Those are 2 of their usual starters that have both been out, but they've still gotten 6 straight wins without them. Second in the Eastern Conference, and their past 2 wins were over 2 of the better teams in the NBA, the Denver Nuggets and the Boston Celtics, who they beat by double digits. I know both those teams were dealing with injuries in those games. Denver has been without Jamal Murray for a little bit. Boston was without Drew Holiday. But even still, like I said, the Magic themselves are dealing with some significant injuries, and those teams are still really good. You've still got to beat Nikola Jokic, who is the best player in the world. You've still got to beat Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Kristaps Porzingis and Derek White, even with Drew Holiday out. Beating those 2 teams back-to-back is a major accomplishment for any team, never mind this young rebuilding squad that is trying to prove that, hey, we're not a fluke, that we're legit, we belong up here towards the top of the Eastern Conference. And the more that I watch this Magic team, the more that I believe they do belong in this playoff picture. I don't know if they're going to finish as the 2 seed, but I do believe they've got the makings of a playoff team. The biggest part of their success so far has been the defense. They developed that defensive identity last season, and they've carried it over in a big way this year, improving on it to the point where they're tied for the best defense in the NBA at this point. The offense has been very shaky. They're in the bottom 10 offensively, but I do think if they find a way to add some more floor spacing, which is really the big issue for this team, that offense will get better and better. Let's talk about the defense. It really has been a team effort so far. Jamal Mosley has gotten everybody, whether you're a star or like the last guy on the roster, to truly buy in on this defensive end. There's very few, if any, weak links on this entire team. Paolo Banchero, who's been their leading scorer, and shout to him, he's doing it efficiently, has locked up defensively. He's this physical but surprisingly mobile 4 that has been very disciplined on that end. We saw a lot of that in the second half of last season. We saw some of it with Team USA, and now he's been very versatile for the Magic. Again, not just being their leading scorer, but being one of their key defenders on a lot of possessions. And offensively for him, he's still putting up 19.6 points per game. He hasn't been a slouch or anything, and he's doing it very efficiently, by the way, shooting over 40% from deep. He's been great so far. He's just not trying to take over too much. He's letting the game come to him in those big moments where they need buckets. Paolo's stepping up, and against the Celtics, he was very good. Went 10 of 16 from the field, 23 points, 7 boards, 5 assists. Been doing a lot of playmaking for this team so far this season. Just loved what I've seen from Paolo. He's shown that he can not just be like this dominant scorer, but he can be a bit of a chameleon, whether they need him to lock in defensively and just kind of take a backseat if someone else is hot, or if they need him to step up and score like 30. Paolo can do pretty much whatever you're asking for of him, which is huge for a franchise player. Franz Wagner, kind of similar situation, not putting up a ton of points. Efficiency has been a bit hit or miss so far in the early going, but he's giving them enough offense and still being that Swiss Army knife type defender that we've seen him be over the past couple of seasons. Jalen Suggs has been huge for this team. I made a Magic video before the year, and I talked about their guard situation, which was a bit confusing. They had like Markelle Fultz, Jalen Suggs, Anthony Black, Gary Harris, Cole Anthony, like all these guards that felt like they needed some minutes here and there, and I wasn't sure who was going to be a long-term fit for this team. And so far through the early going of the season, feels like Jalen Suggs has established himself as one of those long-term fits. Gives me so many Marcus Smart vibes, that physical, aggressive defender who's going to make those hustle plays. He's going to hit some ridiculous shots. Even if he's like 0 for 10 so far in the game, he's going to hit some of the big ones. He's going to make those small plays that get you the win, even if he's frustrating at times. I love Jalen Suggs' game. I love these pesky, get all up in your face and frustrate you type of defenders like him. And the three ball, he's hitting it at a career clip so far, right around 35%, which isn't phenomenal, but that's good enough if he's giving you the defense that he has so far, which I believe has probably been all defensive caliber. If not, at the very least, he's in that conversation. You're doing this defense also without Markelle Fultz, who's one of your better guard defenders. Wendell Carter Jr. is one of your better bigs. Goga has stepped up in a big way as their main starting big in his absence. Mo Wagner's been great as an offensive big off the bench, was huge against the Celtics, just destroyed them. He has really stepped up in the absence of Wendell Carter. You're getting great defensive play from Jonathan Isaac on the defensive end, which a few years ago wouldn't have been a surprise, but after all those injuries and him missing it felt like 3 seasons in a row, it's just good to see him actually out there playing, but the defense has been a very pleasant surprise. You've got Anthony Black as a rookie who his offense has been shaky. That was to be expected coming out of the draft, but defense has lived up to the hype. He's been phenomenal on that end. Like I said, everybody is playing defense. There's really no significant weak links on this team, and it's let them clamp up basically anybody and everybody. Additionally, with this win over the Celtics, they've pushed themselves to the top of their in-season tournament group, and it looks like they're probably going to make the next round, which is super fun for a young team. When we got this in-season tournament, I was hoping we would see stuff like this, where you see a young team that's bursting onto the scene, that's making themselves known, push themselves into the in-season tournament where they can make some noise and say, hey, you have to take us seriously, which, again, the more that I watch the Magic, the more that they play, you need to take this team seriously. They are a legitimate, really good squad. Again, like I said earlier, I don't know if they're going to be the 2 seed at the end of the year, but at the very least, this feels like a playoff team. And if Paolo continues on the rise that he's on and Franz does, and if they manage to add a third piece next to those guys, they've got some salary they could potentially flip into a star caliber player if they wanted to around the deadline. If they find a way to do something like that, this Magic team goes from, oh, they're kind of fun and somewhat scary, to legitimately terrifying very fast. Also deserving of some acknowledgement is head coach Jamal Mosley. He's been great so far. It's not easy to get a young team like this to buy in so heavily defensively, especially your young stars like Paolo and Franz, but they've done exactly that. They know what they need to do to win, even though the spacing is ugly, even though the offense isn't great. They're still able to get wins because of that defense, and he does enough to scheme themselves into good offensive possessions, even if guys aren't hitting the shots always. I've been very impressed with him so far, one of the top Coach of the Year candidates. Yeah, the Magic are back. As for the Celtics in this game, I don't have too much to say. They just always seem to struggle against Orlando in particular, and this defense, like I said, is very good for the Magic. Jaylen Brown in particular really struggled, 6 of 22 shooting, 18 points. Not his best game, but the Celtics, they'll be fine. They've still got the best record in the league so far. Meanwhile, on the other side of the rebuilding scale from the Magic, we have the Detroit Pistons. I didn't have lofty expectations for Detroit coming into the season like some people did. I thought they'd be better. Last season they won 17 games, but they were tanking for Victor Wembanyama, and Cade Cunningham hardly played last season. Coming into this year, I was expecting a big breakout season from Cade, huge jumps from Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, who were 2 of my favorite young players last season. Duren in particular, been a huge believer in his ever since he got drafted. I like the Ausar Thompson addition. He really popped in Summer League and preseason. I thought Monty Williams coming in as head coach would be a big addition for this team. Ultimately, I was just expecting them to be better, even if they didn't win that many more games, like say they won 30 or something like that. 13-win improvement is big, and if you could just get yourself out of the cellar of the Eastern Conference, I think it's a big step forward, and next year, maybe that's your breakthrough season where you become a play-in or even a playoff team, and you finally get back on track. But so far, they've been an absolute train wreck. Last night, they lose to the Indiana Pacers, getting outscored 30-7 in the last 8 minutes, and fall to an abysmal 2-14 on the season, which is the worst record in the NBA so far, half a game worse than the Washington Wizards ahead of them, who are 2-13, which those two teams play on Monday, which may be the worst game of the NBA season. The Pistons are currently on pace for 10 wins this season, which somehow is worse than last year when you won 17, and that was when they were purposefully tanking, not having their hopeful franchise player in Cade Cunningham play, as they were in pursuit of Victor Wembanyama. Somehow, they've been worse. And I know they've dealt with injuries. I know Duren has missed time. I know Bojan Bogdanovic hasn't played so far yet. And I think when he comes back, it'll certainly make things better. But they haven't shown me anything so far that shows they're going to get anywhere close to play. And this feels again like a team that probably won't win more than 20 games. And this has been a theme for the Pistons for years at this point. They haven't won more than 23 games since 2018-19. That was forever ago. That was 4 seasons ago. And that season they went 500 and got smacked by the Bucks historically in the first round. Since then, it's been 20-win season after 20-win season after like 17-win season. Like they've been tanking for a while now, and it still feels like they haven't gotten anywhere. Like they've seen some promising things. Jalen Duren has been great. We've seen some good flashes from Cade, although there have definitely been some concerns. Like Ivy's had some moments. Ausar Thompson looks like a huge X factor for this team going forward. If that shot can ever fall, like there's some things to be interested in, but there's a lot more things to be concerned about. Like I said, Cade Cunningham has been really fun at times. He's trying to do a lot with a roster that just isn't very good. They have no spacing for him whatsoever. It's one of the worst spacing teams I've honestly ever seen constructed. There's just no room for him to operate. And as a guy who loves to attack, get downhill, finish around the basket, which is a spot that Monty Williams keeps putting him in. He keeps putting him in these isolation heavy sets. There's no way for him to get to the rim because he attacks and 2, 3, 4 defenders collapse because basically nobody outside of him can hit a 3. So he doesn't have any room to operate to play his game. Sometimes he'll have these big time performances, but he'll also throw a lot of turnovers, which again, I think is part of the spacing because there's just no room for him to do anything. He's getting stripped. He's trying to make things work that just aren't open, but also he just needs to be better at taking care of the ball. I haven't loved his burst so far this season, which he missed all of last year pretty much. So I'm not going to knock him for that too much. It might just take some time for him to get that back, but he's struggled to create separation. Like I've got some concerns about Cade Cunningham as a player, but I think a lot of it is also just this awful situation that you've put him in. It's stunting his development. It's preventing him from having a chance to succeed and establish himself as a great young player in this league because he just doesn't have a lot around him. Killian Hayes continues to play big minutes despite not really playing well at all this season. The offense still has not come along. The defense, which is something in the past he could hang his hat on, has not really existed much at all this season. He's been starting over Jaden Ivey, who for some reason Monty Williams has banished to the bench for a majority of the season. Now recently he's back in the starting lineup, but even when he's playing, like this game, he had a really, really good beginning. And at the end of the game, it felt like he got froze out of the offense. I don't know if that was just the way the team was playing or if it was Monty Williams himself, but for some reason, it feels like Monty Williams just doesn't like Jaden Ivey. And Ivey's a guy that I believe could be really good in this league. He's the future backcourt mate for Cade, it seems like. Give him more minutes. If you're going to be bad, at least put out the young guys who are likely going to be part of your future. Don't put Killian Hayes out there in starting lineups. And last night, he puts Killian Hayes in for a majority of the fourth quarter when they had this massive collapse. For some reason, he was playing over Ausar Thompson, who I know Ausar Thompson isn't a good shooter. He's shooting like 12% from 3. And I know Killian Hayes provides a bit better spacing, but neither one of them are great, and at least Ausar Thompson's going to give you great defense, which they desperately needed when the Pacers went on a 30-7 run in the fourth quarter over the last 8 minutes. They really could have used Ausar out there, but he just didn't get put in as one of the better defenders, the best defender on that team. I just don't know. Monty Williams has confused me. I thought he was a good coach in Phoenix, and I thought he'd be a good coach when he came here, but so far it's been a disaster. He's tried to use Cade too much in isolation, not play him as the player that he is. His rotations have been super questionable at times, just randomly benching players for no reason. It just doesn't make sense. I don't know what he's doing. So the personnel isn't good. The coaching hasn't been good. They've been dealing with injuries. Nothing is going well for the Pistons at all so far. And if we go back to last year's trade deadline, the Pistons are 4-37 over that time. 4-37, which is a 41 game sample size. That's, if you put it to an 82 game season, an 8-win season. And I think they're going to end up winning more than 8 games. I think they'll win more than 10 games, which is what they're currently on pace on for now this season. Because, Bojan will come back, and I refuse to believe it'll be this bad the rest of the season. But this doesn't feel like a team that's getting better. They're in like year 4 or 5 of their rebuild, and they still don't have an identity. They still don't have an established core group of guys. Like, there's some really, really fun young talent on this team, but it feels like nobody's in a position to succeed. I don't know how good they could be because the roster's just not great around them, and they're not being put in spots that complement their strengths. I just really don't know what to make of this team. Do you go out there and try and trade for some star player to salvage this season, even though that feels like it's shortcutting and won't really get you anywhere unless you find a really, really big name star? And even then, the supporting cast is still going to be bad. Like, do you do something like that, or do you tank another season, get another top pick, and just hope that this is the one that saves you, that Cade continues to develop, that Ivy, Duren, Ausar Thompson, all these guys put it together alongside the new young player, and you figure it out? Like, is that the path forward? I don't really know. And it makes me even more concerned when I haven't loved a lot of what I've seen from new GM Troy Weaver. Since he's been here, he's made some good decisions, like Marcus Sasser's been really good. He was a good draft pick. I think Duren was a good selection. Ausar Thompson. I would give him credit for Cade, but he was like the consensus #1 overall guy, so I don't know if I want to go with that. And he's put together a roster that doesn't really complement his top star. Like, I don't know why they made the James Wiseman trade last year. That confused me in the moment, and even still now, just completely doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I don't really know how much confidence I have in him as a GM to build a team around the young guys that they have, to make them successful, to be a good team into the future. So do you trust him with a star trade? Do you trust him to continue to lead this rebuild forward? I don't know. It just feels like they're stuck in basketball purgatory, and I really don't know where the light at the end of the tunnel is for them. As much as I like a lot of their young talent, I don't know if this group of guys could be the core that leads you to a championship, because we haven't really seen any returns yet on any of their good play. So yeah, it's just been a mess over there in Detroit. I feel really bad for Pistons fans because this thing has gone on forever. Hopefully it comes to an end soon for y'all. It's just tough because you see the Magic thriving. You see the Thunder starting the rebuild after the Pistons, or right around the same time actually, and now they're one of the best teams in the Western Conference. The Pacers did a rebuild like that and are one of the better teams in the East so far. Like, all these teams that started rebuilding around when the Magic did, the Rockets too, they're all kind of figuring it out at least a little bit, and the Pistons are still the worst team in the NBA. Let's go ahead and talk about the rest of these games. Some of them might be kind of quick because I've very quickly run out of time to record here. Devin Booker destroys the Memphis Grizzlies. No Kevin Durant, no Bradley Beal. No problem. Memphis takes another loss. Just can't seem to buy a win, especially not against Devin Booker, who was red hot in this one. 40 points, 5 boards, 4 assists. Hasn't been on the court a ton, but when he has very easily looked like one of the best players in the world. Just keeps getting better. The Knicks beat the Miami Heat after Jimmy Butler misses a step-back 3 to try and win the game at the buzzer. Doesn't go down. For some reason, the Heat are just unbelievably unclutch so far this season. It's been a problem for them the last few years where they get these big fourth quarter leads, blow it, and then find a way to win at the end, but in this one, didn't manage to get that win. I think they were up by like 20 in the fourth quarter and just completely fell apart. A big part of that was the play of Jalen Brunson, who was unbelievable in this fourth quarter, hitting huge shot after huge shot down the stretch. Big and one from RJ Barrett late as well, and the Knicks get another win. They've been pretty good to start this season. The Raptors beat the Bulls by 13 points. There was a controversy at the end of this game that was one of the more interesting parts, where Siakam shoots the ball late despite the Raptors having a big lead, and then DeMar DeRozan gets mad afterwards saying like, oh, why are you shooting when you're up? Like, respect the game. And they're like, oh, it's all for the in-season tournament because point differential does matter with the in-season tournament. But DeRozan's like, I don't care about that. It's about the morals of the game or whatever. The funny part about this whole thing is I'm pretty sure both teams have already been eliminated from the in-season tournament, or at least have just astronomically low odds to make it at this point. So it really didn't matter on either side, so they're both just arguing, which is hilarious. The Kings blow out the Timberwolves, shot really well from 3. Great performance from De'Aaron Fox, 36.7 boards, 12 dimes. He's been absolutely incredible. Kings get another win after I believe a couple losses in a row. The Rockets blow out the Nuggets despite a great Jokic performance. They continue to find ways to win, just locking up everybody else and letting Jokic cook. Nuggets need to get Jamal Murray back soon to really find their true footing. You have the Bucks beating the Washington Wizards, barely, behind crazy performances from Giannis, Dame, and Brook Lopez. Giannis at 31-9-3, Dame at 31-7-10, and Brook Lopez ties his career high with 39 points to go with 5 boards and 1 assist. He was unbelievable in this one. The Wizards had absolutely no answer. They kept the game close, made a bit of a comeback towards the end, but ultimately just weren't enough for the dominance of Brook Lopez. Also to note in this game, Chris Middleton left with Achilles soreness. We'll keep an eye on that. I haven't seen an update on his status, but it just feels like injuries continue to be a problem for him as of late in his career. You've got the Warriors beating the San Antonio Spurs behind another Steph Curry masterclass. 35 points, 3 rebounds, and 6 assists. They were up huge at the end of this one and nearly blew it. The Spurs came really close to coming all the way back. Just some turnovers, some bad shots. They do hold on and win, but it was a bit concerning the way they collapsed at the end. And finally, the Pelicans beat the Clippers behind big games from Brandon Ingram and Zion. 30 points from Ingram, 32 from Zion. They're picking up steam despite some of the injuries that continue to plague them, beating a Clippers team that still can't find consistent wins with James Harden now on the squad. But yeah, with all that being said, those are my thoughts on these games. Would love to hear your takeaways down below in the comments. Do you think the Magic are legit? What should the Pistons do to turn things around? My neighbor has now decided to start leaf blowing, so hopefully you can't hear that. But as always, I appreciate y'all watching. Like I said earlier, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. And yeah, I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. A real one, say it back.